am Allison Sekular. I'm the Vice President of Research at Baycrest Health Sciences. I'm a professor in psychology at U of T and psychology, neuroscience, behavior at McMaster University. And I also run the Rotman Research Institute and the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. And this is my very first meeting. So thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here and it's great to meet you. I read the book when it first came out, and then I read the book again, obviously, for this meeting. And my view of the book has changed so much because, of course, in my field, in psychology and neuroscience, there's obviously so much work that's built on the concepts that have come out of the book, almost to the point where it's become almost like a reductionist crutch as an explanation. So it made me think a lot about some of the debates we've had around reductionism and neuroscience. And when nowadays, especially at McMaster, which is really known for evolutionary psychology research, there's almost every sort of behavior, everyone will end up saying, well, from an evolutionary perspective, if you think about the selfish gene, it makes sense because blah, blah, blah. And I guess my question for you is whether, have we gotten to the point where the explanation of behavior as an instantiation of the selfish gene is a real explanation of behavior? Or is it just becoming, in at least some of these examples, sort of another form of reductionism?
I've always been worried about what reductionism actually means, because it seems to have rather a lot of different meanings. One of the meanings it has is demeaning to humans. You talk about reductionism, by which you mean that somehow it's insulting to humans. It reduces them.
No, here I mean that it's not an explanation. It just sort of takes it down. Yeah.
Well, a bit that I don't get. I mean, the other meaning I was going to say was reductionism in the sense of explaining complicated things in terms of simple things. And so you might talk about a reductionist explanation of the way the brain works or the way the computer works. A reductionist explanation of the way a computer works would be in terms of transistors, for say, of integrated circuits of bits, not noughts and ones. A reductionistic explanation of the mind would be in terms of neurons.
Right.
But that's the other meaning, and they're totally different, those two meanings. Have you introduced a third meaning when you say not an explanation at all?
No, it's really that last one, similar to just sort of saying, well, it's just because this is how the neurons work. For example, it might be one way in terms of the neuronal interaction. So is it, I guess, and I actually a believer that we need to be able to explain behavior in terms of how the neurons are working, for example, or how the genes are working. But some people will say, well, that's not a real explanation of the behavior, that it's going down to too low a level to be able to really understand it.
Yes, okay. I agree that if you want to understand how the brain works, how the mind works, you do not go down to the neuronal level necessarily. You stop at higher levels. Just as in the case of how a computer works, you talk about subroutines for doing this, subroutines for doing that. You talk about major parts of the system, and I call myself a hierarchical reductionist, I think, where you work your way down. If you finally get down to the level of noughts and ones in the case of a computer, or neurons in the case of the brain. However, that's a physiological thing. I'm not talking about physiology, I'm talking about evolution. And so for me, what the selfish gene is doing is not really trying to explain behavior in the way that a neurophysiologist might do it, or you as a psychologist might do it for that matter, but rather, when somebody goes out into the field in the Serengeti or somewhere like that and watches jackals or hyenas or lions, the kind of question they now ask, because of the selfish gene and the other similar ideas that go with it, is in what way is the behavior of the jackal favoring its own genes? And that's a different kind of question from in what way is it favoring the group, for example, or even in what way is it favoring itself as an individual? If you look at it from the point of view of the gene's eye view, then the way you see your hyenas and your jackals and your vultures and your eagles and things is different. You actually see it as a machine that's working every moment of the day to propagate its own genes. And that is a different way of looking at things.